Hello. I just wanted to make a video on my thoughts, my reflections on my profiling session with Eric Strauss of talking with famous people. So just let me know what you think after I'm done. I'm trying a new way of positioning and trying to get at what's going on with me and what I think about the theory and stuff like that. So yeah, this is not exhaustive. It's just hitting on the parts I enjoyed, found interesting, revealing, and so on with my typing that I shared a link to in my previous videos. In one of my previous videos, I mean. The questions on my sleep and eating habits and bad habits were interesting as I felt they were trying to angle into the physiological expression of SI, what are the devices the body and mind are. The creative outlets question, I guess, was to get at any. The question of being a judge or competitor for poems was interesting because they reminded me of my method to get at my own style and tendencies and creativity, which is like trying to jump on my own shadow. I can't talk to myself in my head, so a lot of my expression, be it speaking and writing, is freestyle with an audience in mind, or as my siblings know, sometimes I try to articulate things I can't think out to them with cues of logical coherence without a perceptive feel for the operation. I've always had a good autobiographical memory, perhaps due to self absorption or close tie to anything that holds relevance to myself. Many people who I suspect are INFJ also have a good autobiographical memory, like Tolstoy and James Joyce, so I wouldn't dismiss someone being an INFJ who is prone to have a good autobiographical memory. Where this is possible because it is forming a narrative, not because it is a frame of reference, which is what SI tends to use its experience and narratives for. Of course, NI ideas can be drawn from SI, which some speculate is how, depending on the mind configuration, works. There are different phases for making a situation intelligible or characterizing it as an operation, which ranges from its style of preparation, lag and or start, stop and resumption, finish, completion. This is too abstract to get at, though it is abstracted from the structure of events. Anyway, I'm thinking more of SI in the Jungian sense. From what I can remember, the mind modality is impressed on arbitrarily by impressions. It compares and contrasts, savors and forms ideal models of the persistent pattern of the sensory and so on, which I do not do and find odd when others do so in real time. Like my mom is an ISFJ. She mostly goes into her experiences to elucidate a point, where I only do this if the point requires it. I also see her role function and I lease insights, which my TI finds either plausible or implausible, based on numerous factors considered. I think this dynamic of the slots of the functions is worth more of an investigation and is really what can contribute to a particular performance, catalyst, context, and so on. And I feel like this is what should have been mostly explored by. This is what the main thing that should be explored by tests. They shouldn't just explore what functions you have, they should explore how the functions interact with each other. Most of the time, I don't mind a frame of reference, just understanding or this or not, I just most of the time I don't need a frame of reference. I just need an understanding or idea. Like I naturally act, react, and manipulate the world and observe things with a fresh minding. In the past, I was big on noticing details and felt the pressure and the timing of the world and others, or inspiration on how a sensation would feel in my body. Whatever type I am, I don't value or use SI the way an SI user would from Dom to inferior, and I find SI quote unquote conversations boring. If SI is more in tune with physiology, then it explains somewhat why the early questions on my sleep and eating were pointless to me, though I knew the purpose and what they served. I do find I'm more prone to comfort now, though, when before I loved intensity, texture, and challenge. For the operationalize of the washing of the dishes, I have to remember how I do it by talking out loud, but Eric interpreted that as operationalizing. Curiously, when I did the same thing for the TI test, he took it as me working out the problem when I was merely trying to remember it and then waiting for the feel of the answer since I can't reason anymore. All my previous operations are now mostly unconscious, like I no longer collapse complexity into succinct encapsulations, which is what I used to do consciously with TI and NI. I was personalizing instead of thinking, of setting it up for somebody to understand, like step 1, put away dry dishes, step 2, take out dirty dishes, step 3, rinse off, step 4, make soapy water in container, step 5, wash, step 6, rinse off and put away to dry. It's subjective what one considers a priority for how to make steps, which is why I don't value TE, since it seems artificial and superficial to me, compared to the thoroughness of TI, though it does real-time adapt and sets orients better. I'm better at giving operations and breaking down actions I'm not doing in real time into them, as that feels like a waste of attention. I'm pretty good at getting physical things done in an efficient way, still. Overall, I wish there was a better investigation of what I was doing given my issues. The Blanky and Parsnips question was so difficult for me because I couldn't hold the numeric codes of the Blanky and Parsnips mentally to operate on them, and for some reason, I didn't penetrate into the characterization or coding of the Blanky and Parsnips. It just slipped past without registering. I'd have to see it in front of me and go region to region with recognition that subitizes, multiplies, and aggregates. This is why I struggle with math now, despite enjoying it before. It was a basic math problem-solving situation that anyone can do if they can present in their minds, if they can represent in their minds, or think in coding and follow self-unfolding logic. It can be argued that TI is suited to conditional reasoning, rules of inference, and the relationships and variables that constitute a given presentation, be it propositional, perspectival, or procedural. I used to study logic in middle school and was more of a reasoner as far as how my TI went, but it was reasoning about events and how people can know the world. My interest in logic is one of the reasons I was into Wittgenstein and tried making everything fit a logical scheme, even in my religious struggles, were due to like where even in my religious struggles, I noticed that my problems were due to encountering the non-logical or things that cannot be logically encapsulated, but weren't necessarily illogical. I find it easiest now to use TI perspectively in the physical world, and resulting from this procedurally, where I can parse and relate the percepts of events better than sustaining their coding or symbols. In that regard, without processing and holding codes, which was what happened with me, one can't solve propositional TI problems with multiple joints and what can best be called the chemistry of abstractions, since the abstract judgment is dependent on the activity and perception. I don't fully understand what all of this comprises, but I know I struggle greatly with math as a result of this. In short, all the TI questions hit a sore spot for me about how the negative symptoms of my condition have impacted me by ruining much of my executive function. I didn't actually tell a story for the thing about running with the story of a turtle. I merely improvised fragmented activities. I was glad he was able to play with it though. He definitely values play, which I typically appreciate if I'm in the mood for it, which I was in the video, hence why I was playing and laughing so much. The question of whether feelings are revelatory of import or drawing a line was interesting to me because I made a retro meta interpretation with how I answered. Because by nature, feelings, according to some books I have on emotions, they communicate emotions, which are the motivations and drives of what is important that formulate ideals and so on. They can be instrumental in drawing a line of what's important to you, but by nature they are revelatory if you examine them in retrospect. About originally being typed as an ENFP, I found that interesting because I like ENFPs as people, and when it comes to people, but not when it comes to accuracy or, I guess, I'm sort of put deep understanding. The hanky panky game was both NE and NI to me, involving linguistic ideation and association, collapsed to align with the presented scheme, all things I cannot do consciously, and especially not together. I loved these kind of games in the past and found them so fun since I was verbal, ideational, and precise in ways that was beyond what I am now. I find I rely more perhaps on NE now, as I can only function through action, so every moment is a freestyle where I cannot uh, think in depth, look at perspectives, or class patterns into a theme. In short, I can no longer do NI, at least consciously. It happens more unconsciously, and it happens along the way. And a lot of the statements I make or the things I come to is due to memory or getting insights while in mid sentence or mid expression. I consider NE more in tune with the world and its possibilities and potentials, while NI establishes an implementation and code as to what results in actualities. I need both, but I'm glad my minding has changed to give me a different side of things. Plus, I've imitated my INTP friends' minding very often, and I'm pretty ambiguous and fluid as a person since I can imitate and perform as far as what I have access to. Which I encourage as I subscribe to understanding that if we are developed, we are not supposed to be a type, but to individuate and expand and round out. This was my goal in earlier years, and every new phase in my life has broadened me in different ways where it has become difficult not just due to my illness, but due to ways of experimenting with how I work and acquiring habits that I am capable of contrasting myself, and I'm unsure of my original baseline, though my dispositions are pretty clear. Even while inhibited from certain action potentials, I have the feel for how I'm inclined to be, which postures me more in the foreground as an FETINISE user more than the other functions, though they occasionally show up in the background or in context. One of my friends asked if I didn't do well on the NE test, why it would make me NE inferior instead of tertiary and potentially auxiliary. I don't know. I leave it to Eric's personal sense of how the function shows up typically, as far as capacity goes. I could see other types being able to do it, whether their NE was front stack or not, especially if they were high in verbal capacity. With this, I add that the name function is a misnomer, and they are best called modalities, since they are networks organizing themselves along a context, and at a level of scanning, there is less brain activity as one has proficiency with an activity. I suspect, aside from their coordination, there are within a function different stylizations of rules in display. This is why when people speak of them, they point out them doing multiple procedures, having multiple outputs, and having different characteristics that are irreducible as a unit, but categorized within one mind. Anyway, that's all I have to say. The testing, like most tests, isn't very exploratory of the phenomena of a person taking it. It's about immediate results with what is cognitively accessible and possible, which I fare poorly with in life these days. One could plausibly improve on the test through repetition, too. This would make it hard to determine the base of typical cognitive stylizations, accesses, executions, focus, motives, catalysts, and more. Overall, I would say it's pretty solid for what the theory is and what can be drawn out. Using it a lot, one can develop a personal statistic of what types are capable of typically within a region of encounter or attraction to you as a profiler of them. You cannot, however, be absolute about the mechanics and gestalts that result in this without access to phenomenology, which is what I'm mainly interested in. So that's pretty much all I wanted to say. And I've explored it the best I can in relation to myself and explored myself in relation to it. But I might keep coming back to this topic just to explore the nature of the theory and how it relates to me and how it unfolds me. And because whatever I am, I'm definitely neurodivergent, so it makes it hard to determine or fully know like what's going on with me. And so that's one of the difficulties with this testing and these issues. But anyway, I'm glad you bared with me for this while and you listened to all of that. I hope it was intelligible, even if, well, somewhat intelligible, even if you understood like 60% of it. I would appreciate it. Anyway, let me know what you think. Thanks for watching. Bye bye.